Good afternoon, and welcome to our next webinar in our series of career support events. I'm Karen Ashton from the Office of Alumni Relations at the University of Utah, and I'm pleased that we partner on a regular basis with the campus career experts at the Career and Professional Development Center. They are on campus to guide students and graduates within 2 years of their degree on getting a job on the way out the door, hopefully before they graduate. If not, within 2 years after graduation, you can take advantage of their services at no cost and continue that relationship with these marvelous experts who are here for your career success. I want to thank the Office of Alumni Relations, the staff who put together these events, who present them in our emails and market them, so you all have the opportunity to get ahead in your career and get where you want to be on your career path. I would like to also let you know that the Career and Professional Development Center's presentation today is focused on those recent grads, but these tips for salary negotiation and interviewing are valuable anywhere along the career path. But I want to let you know that if you don't hear the answer to your question submitted, we will give you several resources in a follow-up email tomorrow, so you can count on finding the answers you need. At the Office of Alumni Relations, we have 6 career coaches who have volunteered to take a 1-hour consultation at no cost with our alumni, and then you can have 2 sessions for $150. And if you want to go further, you can negotiate a fee schedule with them. But they are anxious as well to help you find the success you're looking for in your career. Whether you're jumping into the workforce for the first time, switching mid-career, or just looking for a chance to move up in your current role. So I'd like to turn the time over now to Stan Inman, who has been at the Career and Professional Development Center at the university for 20 years. Stan is the director there and a marvelous resource to our students and recent grads. So Stan, go ahead.
Thank you, Karen. It's a pleasure to be with you all today. I understand we have a lot of interest in this topic today, and so welcome. Let me just re-emphasize how, Karen, and as you mentioned, how important this partnership with you alumni is to us and to all of you. It helps us continue to reach alumni and provide the kind of uninterrupted access to career coaching and resources for all alumni. As Karen indicated, our mission in the Career and Professional Development Center is to really serve current students and new graduates up to 2 years after graduation. But the Lighting Your Path webinar series is a great example of the collaboration with you alumni, and it's open to all alumni. So we hope that you will stay tuned to and follow the communication channels of the alumni to participate in other career development presentations. So let me just quickly set the agenda for what we want to do today. Preston and I will just take a few minutes up front to review our continuing commitment to providing career services to alumni and highlight some of the ways you can engage us and access our resources. Francine Mahak will take on the 2 topics of today's webinar, interviewing and salary negotiation. I just want to mention that Francine is one of our most experienced and knowledgeable career professionals, and she's prepared a great set of essential information for you today. But as you can imagine, as it's condensing these 2 topics into a 30 to 40 minute presentation is a tough ask. We won't be able to get to all of the nuances for these 2 topics today, but we'll cover the essentials, and we'll, as Karen, you said, we'll allow for some time for Q&A, and we'll point you, of course, to all of the resources available to you. Just let me now acknowledge that the last 15 months of the pandemic has been so disruptive to careers. Many of you may be rethinking your career path. Some of you may be even seeking new career opportunities. This has prompted the university and the Career Center to really carefully consider the need to provide more support for alumni as they navigate their career decisions and career paths. So in January, we announced that the Career Center would be extending the timeline for graduates, and we're pleased to do that. We want to continue to provide increased support for all of our alumni, but particularly those graduates within the last 2 years. As part of this commitment, I want you to know that we will continue to develop the career programs and events with our partners at U Alumni, like this webinar that we're presenting today. We want you to stay connected with both of our offices. Certainly, again, follow the communication channels for more information and more programs and events like this in the future. Our real promise to you is that we'll continue to offer this accessible career education. We'll continue to put together career events and resources, both online and in person, and try to help you connect with professionals who can help guide your career path. So one quick announcement for you, and we'll follow up with an email with the details. There is an alumni career fair on June 3rd. It's a partnership that this year all of the Utah colleges and universities are involved with our Department of Workforce Services. It's an online career fair, and again, we'll link you to that. But if you're looking for opportunities, there'll be over 200 employers at that fair, and there will be a specific booth or pavilion for employers who are seeking degreed candidates. So it is a Department of Workforce Services event, but in collaboration with our colleges and universities. So watch for that for sure. That's coming just next week. So Preston, I'm going to throw it to you, and you can tell us a little bit more about how to connect with the Career and Professional Development Center and some of the resources we offer.
Yeah, thanks, Stan, and hi, everyone. Before getting to our session today, I just want to take a few minutes and tell you about the services and resources that are available to you as a U alum. And Karen touched on this at the beginning, but if you graduated over 2 years ago, U Alumni is really your primary resource of support on campus. Karen and her team have done a lot of work over the past few years to build out support for alumni through the alumni office, and that includes career coaching and alumni mentoring. I want to let you know that you're also welcome to our career fairs and expos for life. So as soon as we're back doing those in person, you are welcome and encouraged to attend. I might also suggest following the Career and Professional Development Center's blog, Peaks and Valleys, which is regularly featured at the U and can be found on our website at careers.utah.edu/blog. The blog has a lot of strong and timely content, including recent articles on how to ace video interviews, which we all know are a little bit more nuanced than an in-person interview, how to negotiate a salary. Obviously, I think a lot of folks who are with us today are interested in that, and the value of grad school. These are just 3 of the recent topics that we've addressed and published on the blog. Now, if you graduated within the last 2 years, our office, the Career and Professional Development Center, is your primary resource for career support. And the main message here is you have access to all the same services and resources that you had when you were a student, meaning you still have access to Handshake, our online job board, which currently has over 11,000 jobs and internships posted. It features a host of other career exploration tools and job boards in the resources tab. You're still able to drop into our career studio without an appointment for quick help or make an appointment with a full-time career coach. Both of those are being done virtually at the moment, but we hope to be back in person when it's safe. And there are a host of other virtual and in-person services available to you. So I encourage you to go to careers.utah.edu to figure out how best we can support you. So again, whether you graduated within the last 2 years or later, there are a lot of services here at the U that can help you along your career journey. With that, I'd like to introduce you to my friend and colleague, Dr. Francine Mahak, who is here to facilitate a presentation today on interviewing and negotiation. Francine, over to you.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. And thank you all for joining. I will be talking about these 2 very large topics, both interviewing and negotiating. So I wanted to say a couple of things beforehand. So this is very compressed, but what we want to do for you today is to give you a basically good and supportive mindset for you on both, and also some best practices that will help you with both interviewing and negotiating, both for a first position, a next position, and touching a little bit on when you're on the job, because we saw many of you are and want to negotiate. But also, if you are on the job and you're thinking, well, I'll listen just briefly to the interviewing, I really want to hear about negotiation. Like all of us, we probably all will have the chance to interview again. We're kind of interviewing when we're on the job, kind of on a permanent basis anyway. The principles are good, and we will probably be negotiating for promotions and new positions. And so all of this will be helpful for you at different points. So interviewing, let's talk about best practices there. So what is an interview? Two parties exploring a match. It's pretty basic. So that means both sides are interviewing each other. So you can always feel on an even keel with the interviewers. So 3 questions the interviewers have on their mind implicitly, and here they are. Can you do the job? Do you want to do the job, this job? And will we enjoy working with you while you're on the job? So every piece of information and points that you want to include in an interview should be addressing those main questions. So that can help as a good guideline in the back of your mind. So here's a way for you to show that you can do the job. So addressing that first question, here's a worksheet that will be emailed to you after the workshop. And knowing your strengths and tailoring them to each position, whether it's a new position or a position you hope to step into as a promotion, it's important to be able to organize things that address those requirements and preferences. So that's what you would put in the first column here. You see 3 columns. The first one, main requirements and preferences for the opportunity. You would just list the keywords in the first column. And this has just 3 rows, but you can set it up to have many more rows. So what do you do in the next 2 columns? In the next one, you add your relevant strengths or potential contributions for each particular requirement or preference. You list them there. What are your strengths? Strengths are skills, expertise, and personal qualities that are relevant to that strength. So that's where you claim those. In the third column, you provide evidence for each one. And that means brief examples where you demonstrated those strengths, those skills, those experiences, those particular qualities. And so this worksheet will help you prepare your case for the negotiation. It will also help you choose, okay, which are the top requirements and preferences that they have, that if I only had 20 seconds to make my case, which ones would I emphasize for them? You can choose those, and that will help you prepare to describe your case in a nutshell. If they were to say, what makes you one of the best candidates for this position? You would have an answer for that. So this is kind of a think sheet for you to pull all those things together. Moving on to, so what is your value to them? Well, it's your match. It's actually 2 elements. One is your strengths and your experience as relevant to the job requirements and preferences. And I may be saying some things that are obvious to many of you and you have experience now out there, but these are good reminders. So you're always tailoring to what they need. The other part is your market rate based on your salary research. So you have to have expectations that are within a range that is reflected in the market. So why are we talking about salary research now? When is the best time to discuss salary? Is it now in an interview? Many of you know this. No, not in a first interview. After an offer, when you have leverage. In an interview, they may ask you, it's best to deflect. If they ask you for salary expectations, you can say, you can make a couple of points. You could say, I'm still learning about the responsibilities for this position. I can't really name a salary yet. You could also say, I can't really evaluate a salary without it being in the context of your total compensation. So I look forward to discussing that at some point. But sometimes they might really be insistent. No, we really need to know your salary expectations. So you want to be ready with a good answer. which would sound something like this. And this is a good interview phrase. It's a good negotiation phrase. Based on my salary research and the strengths that I bring, which you summarize quickly with that nutshell we just talked about. When you are able to provide both of those are the two pillars of your value to them, whether you're interviewing and talking about it or negotiating and reminding them of those things later on. So how do we do that salary research? Pretty simple. There are salary calculators out there. You can look up many of them. Here are some that we recommend. All of them are going to produce a visual of some kind. So salary.com, it looks like this. So they do a curve. It's a range. They show a range. And by the way, make sure that you include location when you're doing salary research for a position, because of course, location makes a difference in the rates and cost of living and salaries and all of that. I just want to make one point. Often employers will say, well, Utah's cost of living is low if you're applying in Utah. Of course, what you want to say is it is rising rapidly. And so you want to negotiate based on that. So this is a curve. Other salary calculators may show different forms of graphs, but essentially they all give you a range. So this might be a pretty broad range with tens of thousands of difference of span. So how do you choose a range within it? How do you narrow down and maybe choose a salary? So it's not an exact science, but that's the other part. You evaluate the strength of your match. So how close are my skills, my expertise, and my qualities to what they're looking for? So you might be at the median, above the median. You might say the tippy top for people who've been out there doing this for a long time, which may be a lot of you who are here now today. If you have a lot of experience that's directly applicable, that is great. Even if you have experience, all of you, that is transferable, it may be similar, or you've certainly demonstrated skills that you could transfer to a different kind of job. That helps move you up. So you evaluate your match and you come up with a more narrow range. Like I'd probably walk away if it was too far below the median, but I have a lot of experience. I have this and this and this very precisely to try to match precisely. So I think if I were asked to name a salary, I might name it here. And of course, the ranges that you get will have actual numbers in them that will help guide you. But that's how you narrow down with a salary calculator. So much for salary calculators. The whole point is you need to do your salary research early. And in applications, sometimes they want you to fill in your salary expectation. If you can't get away with putting in zeros, because you don't want to negotiate that now, if you do your salary research, you could name a figure that you could come down a little bit on, but that you know is within a market range because you've done your research. Okay, so now interviewing on to some of the big five that are typical in interviews and just some best practices about those. Okay, so one, tell me about yourself. Two pitfalls that people can fall into with this one. One is reciting their resume, which the interviewers usually have in front of them. So it's fine to draw from your resume, but bring it to life. Don't just repeat things that are on there. So you would say, well, you noticed that I resolved a particularly difficult challenge, and let me tell you how I worked through this and how complicated it was. I needed to bring together several experts for different parts of this area so that we could collaborate together. I needed to do some very complicated calculations. I needed to do this, that, and the other. You kind of describe the story and you bring it to life for them, and they can see you can solve challenging things. That's a good example. So another pitfall is rambling, because often people are just kind of not expecting the question and they don't know where to begin. And they may start with things like, well, I was born in this city. Oh, and let me tell you about this city. It's a really beautiful city. That does not come within that range of, can you do the job? Do you want to do this job? And will we enjoy working with you on the job? So don't go off on things that aren't relevant, unless you have something really distinctive, like, oh, I also have a black belt in jujitsu. That's kind of interesting. That kind of says a lot about you. Or I'm a published poet as well. That's interesting. You use different parts of your brain. But aside from that, in the tell me about yourself, once you've given something a little introductory, you can pivot to using that nutshell of how you match by saying, and what makes me so excited about this position is the fact that what you are doing is very aligned with the kinds of experience that I've had. And what I particularly enjoy doing is this and this and that, which matches what you are looking for. Here are the kinds of contributions that I'm really excited to make, for example, and you base that on evidence as well. So that way you can address the purpose of the interview, all three questions in a nutshell. Okay, name one of your strengths. Why do people ask about strengths and weaknesses? Well, they just want to see, are you self-aware? Do you know your strengths and weaknesses? We hope so. All of us have things that come easily to us and things that don't come easily to us. And so they want to know, can you name them? So for a strength, choose something that comes easily to you that you have excelled in and give a good example of how you demonstrated it. How about a weakness? Choose a weakness, something that has not come easily to you, that you have developed a good strategy for so that it's not going to be a problem. So for example, you could say something like, well, when I was in school or when I started working, I found I had difficulty managing a lot of simultaneous projects and keeping everything on time and well organized. That wasn't easy for me. But don't leave it at that, because then they think, oh no, is that going to be a problem? Instead say, so I researched several time management methods and applications, and I finally found them that works really well for me. I've been using that. Keeping projects organized and on time is much easier for me now. So then they know you've had something, you've had a challenge with it, and you've met that challenge. That's what they want to do. Another one, why do you want to work here? Be prepared for that question very specifically. Have an answer. So think, well, what does excite me about this position? Even if you have other positions you're excited about or more excited about, in this interview, this is the exciting one for you. And so say specifically what excites you about this job, and find things about the company that you want to say, and not something really general like, oh, well, because Intel is so famous and it's the greatest chip maker in the world. Like, oh yeah, we know. No, say something that shows you've researched them, and that indicates interest in itself. You'd be surprised at how often candidates just don't have much of an answer. Like, oh, you're number 16 on my list of jobs. That's the way it comes across. So they don't want just to hire someone who wants a job. They want to hire someone who wants this job. So it's worth preparing. And finally, a big one, behavioral questions. The ones that sound like, so could you give us an example of a time when you dealt with X kind of challenge? And you see a formula there, PAR, for answering it, problem, action, result. You might have heard of this from the STAR formula. Employers expect this. They often call it the STAR formula. It's slightly different, but it's the same structure. So when people ask you for a challenge that you've overcome, you need to be ready with stories from your own experience. So think about your experience and what qualities you've demonstrated, what challenges you've overcome, how have you done it? So you can draw on them quickly, draw on one and answer with a structure, problem, action, result. So the problem part, you just give enough information to set the stage. What they're most interested in is your actions and the results that came out of it. So I'm just going to walk quickly through an example, and you can just observe the movement from problem, action, and result. By the way, you don't have to choose a project where you had a perfect result, because if it was sort of middle in terms of results, you can add a takeaway to show what you learned, because they really like to see that people reflect and learn from their experience. So here's an example. Let's say the question is, tell us about a time when you were on a project and a member of your team did not contribute their part. How did you handle that? You could say, oh yes, I was on a project, we were designing a robot, and 2 weeks before the deadline, we realized that one of our teammates just apparently wasn't going to turn in their part. And they just hadn't done much and weren't showing up. So I volunteered to contact this teammate, and I did, and asked them, hey, we haven't seen you. Are you okay? Could you tell us a little bit about what's going on? And I learned from them that they had a really traumatic experience in their family, and they kind of dropped the ball on everything and were really embarrassed, even too much to show their face. And so I said, well, look, we're 2 weeks away. How about I organize a team meeting and you come to the meeting ready with what you can do in the last 2 weeks. And together we'll work on developing a plan. So as a result, we did meet. We were able to craft a plan, and we just squeaked that project in barely by the deadline. And we got a passing grade. That was a relief. But what I learned from that project is that if I'm on a team and someone's not doing their part, I will surface that much, much sooner in a supportive way, the way we did, because we could have come up with a much better solution much earlier. So you can see it's not a complicated way of answering the PAR. It's just a good formula for these questions. Okay, how about your questions for them? Typically, at the end of an interview, they say, any questions for us? And of course, the correct answer is yes. You're excited to ask questions. So do your research, think of questions. What are you curious about? What intrigues you? And there are several kinds you can ask. So for one, information about the job and the company. So you could ask more about the job responsibilities. One question that I like to ask is, if I were in this position, I know that I would have so much to learn at the beginning, the training, that's always the case. Can you tell me, by say the first 4 months, what would you expect that person to be doing independently? And that gives you an idea of how clear the responsibilities are. And then you could follow up with, so what will my training be to get up to speed as quickly as possible? Will someone be overseeing my training? Will I have a go-to person for questions? I really want to be productive as soon as possible. Well, those are some examples of questions for information. You might want to ask the question that is typically known as, what's the culture of your company? I wouldn't ask it that way. It's environmental. So things that you need to thrive in the company, the management style, the values, things like that. Rather than asking directly, you could actually use behavioral questions to ask them. So for example, say you're thinking, well, I'd really like to know the manager's style, especially in a challenging situation. So you might ask it this way, in a supportive way that doesn't put anyone on the defensive, but that can maybe give you a story. So you can say, well, I've observed that naturally on a team, it can easily happen that team members have very different ideas for how to approach a challenge and solve it. So could you tell me a time when on your team, the team members had difficulty agreeing on how to move forward on something, and how did that play out? So if you get a story from the manager, you'll learn a lot more in answer to that question about culture and management style and what the team is like than you would by just asking directly. And finally, logistical, timeline, next steps. When do you anticipate making your decision? So I have a sense of the time frame. Typical questions. Okay, so a lot of content there. How about just being engaging? So you notice here, typical virtual interviews. I wanted to point out, since we might be doing interviews virtually for a long time, the trend of virtual, even pre-recorded interviews started long before the pandemic. Notice that this person has an engaging expression on his face. That helps. Is also making direct eye contact. And it looks as if he's looking straight at the person, but he's actually looking at the camera. So if you want to, and should want to keep eye contact, it's actually by looking at the camera, that little light on your laptop, rather than on their image on the screen. So you don't need to fixate. It's just most of the time be looking straight at the camera. So other ways to be engaging. Be interested, respectful, and engaged. Obviously, be thinking of them. So when you focus on them, that takes the spotlight off of you. It's natural to sometimes feel a little nervous in an interview, but if you're thinking, oh, I can't wait to tell them about this and this, or I'm really curious to hear what they have to say, that takes the spotlight off of you, and that makes you more engaged. Have good eye contact and posture, and just enjoy the conversation. You'll have done a lot of preparation that we were just looking at in the interview. And once you're there, just enjoy it. Just think this is going to be an interesting conversation. It's literally a conversation exploring the match, and you're exploring it as much as they are. So just enjoy it. And that will help you come across in addressing the second two questions, not just can you do the job, but do you want to do this job? And will we enjoy being with you? Your engagement, your nonverbals will make a very big difference. So following up after an interview, of course, you want to send a thank you note, preferably within 24 hours, and include certain things like always express appreciation for the time that they spent with you. And you can refer to an interesting point that you discuss, like, I particularly appreciated or enjoyed our discussion about such and such. That reminds them they might be interviewing a lot of people. And, oh, yes, that was an interesting discussion with so-and-so. And this is the time to add anything you wish you'd mentioned in the interview that you hadn't really meant to say, or I wanted to say. You could add it there. So that closes the loop for them, and it shows your interest and also your courtesy. And that's very important. Okay. So we're going to move now to negotiating, and we're going to pick up some of the same tools and content that we use there. So interviewing is actually a good basis for negotiating. So why negotiate? A lot of people don't, or don't want to, or don't feel they should, or don't feel they have experience, or all these reasons. Not true. Negotiating is professional. It's expected, actually. And we'll go into more why. Collaborative negotiation actually elicits respect for you when you can ask for things in a well-supported way, you marshaled arguments and evidence, you're courteous, you're calm, you're thoughtful. That's a good conversation to have. Even if nothing comes out of a negotiation, it's worth having the conversation, and they'll respect you for it. If they don't, that could be a red flag. Okay, the more you earn, the more you will earn. So the thing is, if we don't negotiate with an offer, we're unlikely to get more than the minimum. It's okay to ask for more and build a case, and we'll talk more about how. So why the more you'll earn? It looks like this. So if you look at this simple graph, these are two candidates who were offered the same position, the same kind of position, at the same salary. And the first candidate with a blue line built in a 1% increase every year over the years all the way to retirement. And this is pretty much how the progression was in terms of annual salary. The other candidate negotiated about a 10% raise at the outset and built in a 4% raise every 3 years. And just look at how they diverge. So within 5 years, if it were, say, an entry-level position right out of college, and they were offered $45,000, so that's not a huge salary, but by 5 years, the second candidate on the green line would be making about $7,000 more a year than the first. By retirement, it will be about $44,000 difference. So imagine the rates that you're negotiating now how much of a difference that can make at whatever point in your career that you are. I spent many, many years in industry, needing to interview and negotiate several times. I didn't always at the beginning, but it made a huge difference when I did. And over time, that builds and builds and builds. And actually, over the whole span for these two candidates, the one with the green line will have earned over $1 million more over time accumulated. So it's worth negotiating salary. Okay. Also, 80% of grads who negotiate are at least partially successful. That is a lot. They get something out of it, if not a lot out of it. How about success rates for non-salary benefits? You can ask for other things than salary, and in fact, some things like the things you see here may be worth more to you than money. So balance those, and you can ask for both. I'd say negotiate salary first, and whether or not you've made progress on the salary, you can say, here are a couple of other things that are really important to me that would really help. And you can see that people have negotiated these things and other things. You can negotiate for an ergonomic chair. You can negotiate on the title, on the time to answer them. There are many things you can negotiate on. They don't have to be within anyone else's list. Don't negotiate based on, I have student loans to pay off, because they'll say, those aren't our responsibility. You always want to negotiate on things that will be beneficial to them as well as to you. So for example, when I have more chance to take a couple of days off throughout the year to refresh, I always come back supercharged, much more creative and productive. So that really works for me. So I'd like to ask for an extra X days of paid time off. Just an example. So any of these things, you always negotiate as benefits to them as well as you. So see that? Again, your value is your match. Same thing. So this is where you get to say again, based on my salary research and on the strengths I bring, remember, and you recap. So state the salary point you've identified, remind them of your matching skills and experience and the contributions that you'll bring. So remember this worksheet. This is where you go back. You review it, you update it. If it's a promotion, you're going to add other skills. You're going to look back at the experiences that you've accumulated and what have you demonstrated in those experiences. What skills, what new skills, what expertise have you built, what personal qualities have you demonstrated. All of those are important to them. So you build your case again, even if you've been working with them for a long time, with this employer, they need to hear these things again, and they need to know that you know your value. And so you're preparing a very specific case. So that worksheet will help you prepare. So again, what made them hire you? Think, what has been your value? After all, they chose you. And whether it's a new position or a promotion, think back to that and remind them of those other relevant strengths and what are your potential contributions from now on based on what you've demonstrated so far. And maybe you can say, so with a little bit of training and mentoring in this area or that area, I will be able to perform extremely well in this job. Okay, this is a collaborative mindset. So one of the reasons people often hesitate to, fortunately in hiring, it isn't. We share the same goal. They want to hire you, you want to join them, or they already have you and they've enjoyed working with you and you're applying for a raise or you're applying for a new position or more responsibilities. They want to have a good collaboration with you. So you share the same goal, it's just a question of terms. So it's collaborative. And that can certainly take the edge off of negotiating. So request a live meeting to discuss questions about the offer, because it is questions that you have in addition to points that you're going to make. So live meeting as much as possible. If you can't have it face-to-face, then if you can have it Zoom, or if you can't have it that way, even phone. Avoid email. So why? Because in email, you cannot monitor the nonverbals. You can't get a sense of how the conversation is going to adjust things during the conversation. And in email, it's very difficult to interpret tone correctly. And so it can just go off the rails. So request a meeting. Frame your request as mutual benefits. We just talked about that and overviewed that. And finally, raise questions, not demands. So sometimes people are afraid, oh, if I negotiate, they will withdraw the offer. Well, when they do, sometimes it's because people are making demands, or they're obnoxious, or they're pushy, or they're bragging and arrogant. And an employer might think, ooh, let's back out of this while we still have a chance. So you're not going to be that way. You're going to be thoughtful, prepared, persistent, but listening very carefully, acknowledging what they have to say. And this is a friendly conversation. And if they say, wow, you're driving a hard bargain, we gave you a really generous offer, you can say, of course, I appreciate the offer. I'm really excited with this opportunity. It's just a question of agreeing on terms that we can both feel good about. I'm sure we'll agree. So you're positive, courteous, but confident and persistent. So practice in front of the mirror, presenting things straightforwardly and confidently and calmly and thoughtfully. So how about managing the conversation once you're there? You've requested the meeting, you've prepared your case, you've practiced because you really want to anticipate questions, you want to anticipate hesitations, anticipate objections. What about this? What about that? You've thought of where they might be as much as you can. Well, once you're prepared, summarize your salary research, highlight your relevant strengths again, just like what you prepared, almost as if you were in an interview again, but it's all updated. Be comfortable with silence and show confidence and grace. So your preparation helps you with this. Silence, often we find it difficult, but practice, have a buddy practice with you, making objections. So if you say, well, based on my salary research and all these things that we just discussed that I bring, I see myself at this salary. And if you see them go, oh no, you can just sit with it. Sometimes we feel, oh, well, I could settle for this much. No. You put the ball in their court, give them time to think, give them a chance, wait. It might feel like forever, but just sit with the silence. That shows thoughtfulness. It's polite to give them time, and it shows your confidence. So if you conduct yourself with confidence and grace, which is a lot about thinking of them, but also thinking of you. So in negotiation, think it's their responsibility to arrange this in the way that's most economical for their organization, like a decent salary and other benefits you're looking for, but economical. It's our responsibility as candidates to make it the best possible, depending on our fit, our potential contributions, and the market rate. So it's normal that there might be a divergence that we're going to work on to bridge. How about accepting or declining the offer? So, and you may have several opportunities, which you can say, I'm balancing several opportunities. Can you use one offer to negotiate the other? Absolutely. But if you have offers, you can, because you want to negotiate the best offer for both and then choose what is best for you. That's perfectly normal to do. They do that themselves. Okay, so how about accepting? So no matter what, whether you plan to accept or decline, or you know that yet, request any changes that came out of your negotiation in writing in an amended offer. So just say, thank you so much. This was such an interesting discussion. I really appreciate this, and I look forward to seeing everything we agreed on in an amended offer. It's even good for you to send an email after saying, thanks again. Here's my understanding of what we've agreed to. Because sometimes people forget or they understand differently. That can be helpful for them in building the agreements into an amended offer. Do not sign anything before you get the real offer. As you agreed, that's important. So this is when you have leverage, is before you accept and sign something. After that, you're theirs. It's not that you can't ask for anything, it's just that you don't have the same leverage. Even if the negotiation doesn't change the offer, you can still accept. So you may have just explored, and certain things didn't change, but you're still above your walkaway point. You're still really excited about this offer. You can say, well, based on how excited I am about this opportunity of joining your team or making my contributions into this position, I'd like to accept. It's like, this was an honorable negotiation, and they'll respect you for that, for just having had the conversation. So decline, frame it not as a no, but as a not now. So if you decline, you can say, I've really appreciated the conversations we've had. This has been exciting and interesting to me. It's been a difficult decision for me based on many factors. I've needed to make a choice in a different direction. I would, however, look forward to perhaps discussing a different opportunity in the future. Thank you so much. So you always keep the relationship. So they think, wow, what a great candidate. It would be great to maybe talk with this person again. Those are our points on negotiation now. Preston is just going to summarize how you can check our resources, and then we'll go to the Q&A that we can have some time for. Preston?
Thank you so much, Francine, for shedding light on interviewing and negotiation. There's just really a lot of wisdom in those slides in your presentation. So thank you. Just a reminder to alums, here's how you can get a hold of us. We have our social media handle, LinkedIn, our blog that I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, and our website. Again, those are free resources. And then if you've graduated within the last 2 years, there are additional resources through our office that you can also access through the website. So with that, I know time's a little short, but I'd like to throw it back to Karen to manage a few questions and to close us out. Thanks.
Oh, thank you so much, Stan and Preston and Francine. Boy, I wish I'd had Francine in my pocket 40 years ago. But those of you who graduated in the last 2 years, you do have all of them in your pocket. A lot of the questions were very similar. I wanted to quickly go. One of the first ones that was addressed and also asked frequently is, when do you ask about the salary? And I think she answered that beautifully. And in the handouts you'll receive in our follow-up email tomorrow, you can review those, as well as reviewing this whole presentation. But basically, someone asked if she could repeat the phrases to use when someone just insists on asking you. And I think her best comment was to deflect and talk about the whole context of the benefits package, but also the sheets that she gave, the Know Your Value, I think that's the name of it, Know Your Strengths, sorry. The preparation for the interview is key. And that would give you the answers. We've all had those moments of just sheer terror when we weren't prepared for that question. And the worksheets that Francine and this office have prepared should eliminate most, if not all, of those moments. The next question is, I think that came up, is about the cost of living. So it is true that Utah's cost of living is rising. And so that was one of the points she gave. You could answer directly when someone says, so you worked in New York, well, Salt Lake's cheaper. But I would highly suggest you go through the sheets that she has. She has one that we didn't show today, but it's actual tips on the negotiation process. The next item that came up frequently, Francine, was how to talk about the non-salary things like, can I work from home? I'm used to that in COVID. Is flex time an opportunity? What are the benefits? And also, what if the salary range isn't posted at the beginning of the conversations? How do you answer that? How do you begin to even throw out a number?
The salary range is often not posted, but that's why you use salary calculators out there online to research that based on location. So we didn't used to have that information before the internet, but we do now. If it's a public institution like the University of Utah, our compensation is public. You can look that up. So sometimes you're able to find out something equivalent or people's actual salaries. But the salary calculators give you the ability to say, based on my research, based on my salary research, based on my market research, because that's where those numbers come from, those ranges. Yes.
So the other intangibles, flex time, or explain to me the intensity. Will there be weekends required? Some of those things are hard to ask because it sounds either like you're whining or you're looking for some real goodies.
Not working on weekends should not be considered a goodie. But it is true. Often in our model of work in the US, you're salaried, you have benefits, just get the job done. And you think, oh, okay. But then it depends on how much is put on your plate. So I would ask that, saying it's often with all the work that has to be done. I've seen in my experience, it can be a challenge to balance work and life. And I'm sure that's something that all of you handle. Could you tell me about what are the typical crunch times and how some of you and some of your colleagues have best handled that? And you might get an idea of how much crunch time there is and what people actually do. I wouldn't say something like, I remember I had a student who said, he put on his resume, willing to work 80 hours a week or have worked 80 hours a week in the lab. Like, don't set up that expectation, because they might think, what, are you slow? Are you inefficient? It's not that. It shouldn't be the hours that you work. In fact, the more efficient you are, the better it is. But they're concerned about work-life balance too. They understand that. But rather than saying, what's the work-life balance, see if you can ask for a story about how they handle specific crunch challenges.
That's a great answer. One specific question we got was, is there a percentage, how much can you ask over so that you have a starting point to come down from? Again, I guess that's that salary research.
Well, like 10-ish% should be reasonable, 5-10%, but sometimes you bring an advanced degree, which brings a lot of intangible skills with it that you have observed. Think, how am I different now in terms of either a graduate degree or years of experience from when I graduated? And what do I bring now? So you can identify. Often we just don't notice our skills, notice them, and how you've expressed them. So that can say, well, based on what I can bring you, I'm really at this level. So you could argue that. It's in the case that you make about it. By the way, I just wanted to say that the tip sheet called 10 Tips for Negotiating on the Job are about negotiating on the job. Now, none of this is everything that you need to know. You had so many questions, but at least it's a start. And if you are beyond 2 years after graduation out there, you have the alumni career coaches. And if you're within 2 years, you have us. So
that's a great point. And it seems to me, as I was looking through all the questions, that Know Your Strengths worksheet will help you answer most of those. And so a couple people asked about, how do you just renegotiate your salary in general? How do you ask for a raise during a promotion? Often we're asked to do more and there's no mention of more compensation. And then also someone asked, what about a 1-year review? And it seems to me that Know Your Strengths could be a really valuable tool for any of those scenarios.
Well, yes, sometimes we're asked to do more and it's not mentioned. Well, it's up to us to mention. Remember, it's up to us, the candidate, to ask for things. We can always ask. You can ask for a signing bonus for a new job if they haven't. You can ask for things, but it's up to us to organize ourselves, organize our case, schedule So there are a few things on the tip sheet about asking for more on the job that you can look at more. But plan it, before they made their budget, so they could think of adding it into it. Plan it when you're being asked to take on new responsibilities, to ask for more compensation for them. And you can ask for a salary review. I can give the example, my son negotiated hard for he didn't want to negotiate at all, but he ended up negotiating for a job he really wanted in Santa Barbara. And the CEO was not a people person, was not friendly. The salary was below market, but my son really wanted it. And so he said, well, okay, how about if within 3 months, I have been able to achieve the goals that we have discussed today, I would like us now to schedule a salary review for them. If I've achieved those goals, then I want my salary to be moved then to this amount. And the CEO said, okay. And then, not a people person, but then they wrapped up, and the CEO, this is so, I think, useful for us to hear, sat back, big smile, said, I'm so glad you negotiated. If you can't take care of yourself, how are you going to take care of my company?
Right.
The value of negotiation.
Well, I think we have time for one more question, and I think this is really germane. How has remote work moved the needle for location-based pay?
Now, Preston and Stan, any answers you have to these questions are fine. I'm just seeing that it's moved the needle a lot. I see a lot of remote positions there. That's often a search filter you can use. And maybe that's something you can also negotiate, at least temporarily. If you accept a remote position for a place in a high cost of living area, California, New York, Utah, negotiate for that location, because they may be asking you to move, and you want to negotiate that before you sign the contract.
Great. Preston or Stan?
I think that's.
Let me just.
Go ahead, Stan.
Sorry. One quick example of that, Francine, is you mentioned your son. My son completed a law degree and was working in DC for many years, and decided DC wasn't the place where he wanted to live and work, but got a remote position. And so he was living in Las Vegas currently. But because of that time difference, it's been a difficult challenge to manage that position. And the requirements of the job have really been expanded in terms of he starts now at 4 o'clock in the morning and doesn't end his day until after 8 sometimes. But he did not think of the cost of living differences, and was really in a DC based position, but not earning a DC necessarily based on that salary. So I would also say that coming out of this pandemic, it's often the case where an employer might be a little hesitant, but we have now learned the efficiencies of remote work. And employers are really now more open than they ever have been to that kind of option. In fact, the University of Utah is opening up some of our opportunities for remote hybrid type work as well. So it's a good time to actually use that as a negotiating piece. It's certainly something that is now proven that we can certainly be effective in that mode.
Great.
You off. Go ahead.
Any last words, Preston?
No, other than I think this is related to the cost of living question. And I think we all are seeing our expenses rise here in Salt Lake City in particular, and throughout the state, and cost of housing in particular. And so the secret's out. Employers used to come to this state because they knew they could pay Utahns 20-30% less to do the job. And that really isn't the case anymore. And so I would just encourage you all to sort of take what Francine's presented today and advocate for yourselves and speak with your employers about the realities of what it takes to live, whether you're living in Salt Lake proper or just in the region. Expenses are really going up. So do advocate for yourself and know your worth and be insistent.
Great. Well, thank you all, Francine, Preston, and Stan, and the Office of Alumni Relations who executed this event. We look forward to seeing you at our next event on June 30th, and we will follow up with lots of links and handouts that you can review. Watch for an email tomorrow. Thank you so much, and go Utah.